How's it going? Welcome to this video. Today we're going to look at how we can create a refund agent using the Stripe MCP server. So we're going to learn a bunch of pretty cool things in this presentation. We're going to have a look at how you can handle conditionals with Portia. We're going to look at how you can generally connect to an MCP server with Portia, and we're going to have another look at clarifications with human input. There are a couple of other introductory videos in this YouTube channel if you wanted to sort of get familiar with some of the concepts, but do not fret. We will go over all of them in this video in due course. So let's jump in. The first thing that I'm going to do is to just give you a sort of overview of what we would expect this refund agent to do, and then we'll sort of dive into the actual setup and we'll go through the code together and we will run it. Exciting. So the first thing we are going to need this refund agent to do is to load a refund policy, which is a policy as you'd expect that describes when we should issue refunds or approve a request for a refund from a customer. We will load the refund request from a text file as well, and then we're going to build two custom tools. One is to take the refund policy, the refund request, and use some just LLM smarts to compare the two. If it decides that the request should be rejected, then it will the outcome of this will be a rejected signal, which should cause the rest of the plan run to be ignored. We're going to have a look at how conditionals are handled. And if the LLM thinks that the person should have their refund request approved, well, lucky them. It then goes to a human, and we're going to need a custom tool here whose main job is to take the verdict from the LLM, surface that to a human in a clarification, which is the interface that we use to handle human-to-agent interactions, and we'll have a look at that more closely. And depending on what the human selects as their verdict, approved or rejected, we will then jump into the final step, or set of steps, I should say, which are essentially going to be carried out using tools that are loaded from the Stripe MCP server. So we will have a look at how all of that gets constructed in a moment. So hang on to your seats. Before we jump in, you're going to need the code for this, which is sitting in our GitHub repo in the agent examples repository. Amongst our repositories, there's one called Portia Agent Examples, and specifically there's the Refund Agent MCP. That's the one that you will want to use, courtesy of the illustrious Sam Stevens from our team. So I have already loaded the example on my computing device. I've got it on VS Code here, so I've got it all open, and we're going to go through it together. So let's have a quick look at it now. I've already done this here, but you will want to go through the README and follow the steps here. You need to install all of the dependencies. We use Poetry. You could use whatever else you want. Make sure that all of that's set up so that you can then start running the actual scripts, which we will walk through in a moment. You are going to need a Portia API key. A Portia API key can be obtained by going into our dashboard. So if you are in our dashboard at app.portialabs.ai, you can go into Manage API Keys and mint yourself a brand new key. Once you have done that, you will also need a Stripe API key. So we'll go over that just now. In fact, you're actually going to need to have a Stripe account set up. So why don't we pop over to the Stripe dashboard and go through that bit right now. So, oh look, my Stripe dashboard's already open. Make sure at a minimum that you've set up your Stripe account. Make sure that you are in test mode. Make sure that you go into the developer view in order to mint yourself a key. And you will need to make sure that that's set up in your environment variables, along with the Portia API key in VS Code. Now, what we're going to do in order for this to run is we're going to go back into our project, and here just if you want to issue a refund, you're going to need a customer, and that customer is going to need an actual transaction that you want to issue a refund for. Surprise, surprise. So the first thing you're going to need to do, let me clear that up, is to run this bit of script here. You don't really need to worry about how this works. This is just using Stripe APIs, and then within the test environment, using your Stripe API key, it's going to create a customer, it's going to create a product, and then it's going to create a payment against that customer, which will then pick up for the refund. So you will just need to run this particular script, and you will need to provide it with an email address. And we will have to keep that email address handy because that's what we will use as the sort of refund requester afterwards, right? So I'm just going to go with my name, test 82, random number, at Portia Labs.ai. If I just run this now, this is going to, there you go, create a customer, a product, a price, and an invoice. Now once you've run this, you will want to go back to your Stripe dashboard just to make sure all is in order. If you go into, there you go, you navigate into customers, you can now see a list of all the customers attached to this account, and this is my Portia 82 Munir test 82 at Portia Labs, and you can see that there's a payment of £10 that has just gone through just now. And so now we can move on to the sort of Portia side of the work here. So let's have a quick look at that. As a refresher, we're going to need, the way Portia works is you have the Portia client, you equip it with a bunch of tools, and then it's going to construct a plan, weave the tools as it thinks it needs to weave them into a multi-step plan, and dispatch a bunch of execution agents to run that plan. So if you remember from the Excalibur, and then I'll stop hopping between those two windows, I promise, if you remember the Excalibur here, this is just going to, we have existing tools that do that in the open source SDK, so don't need to worry about loading files. I did mention that we will load anything related to Stripe interaction from a Stripe MCP server, so we're going to look at that in a second. But I do need two custom tools. One is to ask the LLM to take a policy and request and tell me whether it thinks we should approve the request. And the other one is for it to give that verdict to a human, and we want to have a tool that expects the verdict. And then if a human has not been contacted yet, raise a clarification to collect their verdict before moving on. So those are really the two tools that we need. So let me focus on the code now. How have we implemented this? If you go into your refund agent .py, hopefully the font is decent in the video from a size perspective. The first tool that we need, as we said, is the one that uses LLM smarts in order to decide whether a refund should be issued. And so this is what's described in the doc string here. And what it is we said it takes the refund request and the refund policy as inputs. Those are loaded in previous steps, right? And it's just going to call an LLM and say, I've got these two things. Can you compare and contrast and tell me whether we should issue a refund or not? And notice that we're being explicit in saying, just respond with approved or rejected. And that's what's going to get returned. And then in the next step, we mentioned we're going to need a tool where we want to check. So first take the verdict of the LLM and take the context for the LLM's verdict along with the request. And then what we're going to do is say in this tool, have I interacted with a human to get their approval, yes or no? If no, then this particular tool does not have any clarifications against it. Again, clarifications we mentioned before is the object that we use to handle human to agent interfacing. and the sort of back and forth. And here, this is a confirmation this is a confirmation of the fact that in this tool we have not requested human approval yet. And if not, we will raise a multiple choice clarification, which is one of the types of clarifications we offer. And we're going to give it the option of approved or rejected for the human to choose from. Once this tool is run the first time, the second time around, it is just a case of, this is skipped and the actual verdict is from the human is returned to the rest of the plan run. We're going to look at in more detail at how clarifications are handled by the execution agent. So if this isn't super clear, partly because I butchered the explanation, it should be clear when I walk you through the plan run, I hope. And the last bit it's just the sort of main part of the code. If this is your first time going through a video about Portia, I do think it might be better if you go through the couple of intro videos first, but I'll recap nonetheless. Portia client will take a config, which is where you specify lovely things like, the log level you want, which LLM you want to connect to, API keys, and so on and so forth, and where you want to store your plans. Now, by default, I have a Portia API key set up, so this is going to log everything in the cloud for me. And so we're going to switch over to the Portia dashboard in a second to show you that in action. The second thing that a Portia client takes is a set of tools, as we said earlier. So here, I'm loading it with the tools that we defined inline, we just looked at, the Refund Reviewer tool and Refund Human Approval tool, which are loaded basically from memory here in runtime. I'm also loading the default tool registry. This is a tool registry that comes with the Portia SDK, and what it's doing is it's loading a bunch of our open source SDK tools, and it is saying that if you do have a Portia API key, it's going to load all of the tools that we have in our cloud catalog as well. That includes things like Gmail and calendar and those sorts of utilities, and we're expanding that catalog. Now, I promised you that we were going to see how you connect to MCP with Portia. I do recommend you have a look at our docs for a more in-depth explanation, or at the very least visit the MCP documentation to understand a bit more about how it works. Generally speaking, an MCP server will contain a collection of tool definitions from a particular provider like Stripe. And MCP as a standard allows you to connect to a server either via an SSE connection, where you just need a URL in order to connect. So that would be something like MCP server.from SSE connection, and you would provide things like the server name and the URL and so on and so forth. This is for when somebody like Cloudflare is hosting a bunch of MCP servers live, and you just call them to fetch your tools. In this particular case, we're using an STDIO connection, which is the other way you can connect to an MCP server. And what that does is it's literally going to spin up a Stripe MCP server locally, and it's going to basically call the tools endpoint of it to retrieve all of the tools available in the Stripe MCP server. We're going to see what that looks like in an actual plan run in a second. And the next thing we're doing is, I'll cover the execution context in a second. We are calling first Portia.plan. This summons with the Portia client, it summons the planning agent and says, here's a query, here's a bunch of tools attached to this Portia client via the config. Please read the refund request. We give it instructions on where to load it. Read the refund policy. We give it instructions on where to load that. Make a determination and then seek human approval. We're giving it some high-level instructions on how to interact with the Stripe in general, like sort of how Stripe works. You need to go into Stripe and fetch a customer. You need to fetch the payment intents for that customer, and then you need to, if you want to issue a refund, it would be against that particular payment intent. And the rest of it is essentially just the main part of it. Basically, when you run the script, it takes as an argument the email, which is the email of the customer. Remember, in my case, it's going to be this Munir test 82 at Portia Labs. So I guess this is the main part of the code. I did want to talk about execution context. Let me just talk about that briefly. So this is something we're going to improve in the next few weeks. But generally speaking, the difficulty with using MCP servers is you can't control how the tools are defined. And so in the case of Stripe, for example, they have a few tools that expect a limit, like the list customer endpoint or the list payment intents endpoint. You have to specify a limit. And so the LLM sometimes, it is an optional argument. The LLM will sometimes think it's missing that argument, even though it's optional. And so you can provide runtime context in general. This is something we normally use to provide things like an end user ID, which we talked about in a previous video. In this particular case, I'm just giving it explicit guidance that if you encounter any tools that need a limit, just use a value of 1, right, for the purposes of our test. Again, we're moving to a world where we provide more subtitle whenever an MCP library is loaded, so that you can have finer control. This is a little bit sort of a blunt instrument to get us going for now. So I think these are the key points that I wanted to cover. I think we're ready to run this, and then we'll pop over to the dashboard to follow the execution of it. So in order to run it, I am just going to pick out the command from the README. I mean, fairly straightforward, really. Here we go, and I'm going to make sure, because the person requesting the refund is going to be near, we need to make sure they have an email address with a payment intent. It's going to be this guy. And so this is going to submit the bit from main here, which is the request from the user saying, I bought one of your hoverboards 3 days ago. When I took it out of the box and turned it on, it did not work. Please, can I get a refund? So let's run that and see what happens. Hold on to your socks. Let's have a look. So the planning agent kicked off first and foremost. It is going to mint a plan for this particular prompt, and then we will jump into the plan run. So I'll just wait for that to kick off, and then I'll pop over to the dashboard so we can look at this more closely together. All right, so let's go back to our browser here. I am again in the Portia dashboard. I'm going to go into my plan runs, and here is the plan that I just fired up. Now let's have a quick look at the plan that was created first by the planning agent using the prompt that we gave it around this refund request. You will notice that it has loaded a bunch of tools. All of the MCP tools that you see here are loaded via this MCP tool registry we looked at from the Stripe server. There's a bunch of open source SDK tools and cloud tools that are in the Portia tool catalog in the cloud. And then finally, the 2 custom tools that we created ourselves, one for the LLM reviewer and one for getting a human approval. Now let's have a look at the plan that it's minted for us. In the first 2 steps, as we saw in the Excalidraw diagram earlier, it has loaded the refund policy and the request email using the file reader tool. What it's then going to do is use the refund reviewer tool, apply some LLM smarts to check this request email and refund policy. And based on its verdict, what you will notice is actually going to start to happen is new steps are going to appear because conditions are being added, right? And so we had said that if the LLM approves this refund request, we then want to go and get human approval. And so this is reflected in this condition here. And when the execution agent responsible for this step assesses whether it needs to execute it or not, it will be looking at this condition and testing this particular variable to see if it should continue. And in this particular case, if it should, it will use the human approval tool to raise a clarification. We will look at what happens there during the plan run, because I expect that we will get a clarification in a second. Once the clarification goes through, supposing that the human approval result was positive, you will see that all of the following steps are conditioned on this human approval result. The following task will take place, and the following tasks are all about fetching the customer information, fetching the payment intent, and creating the refund, all via Stripe MCP. Now, let's have a look at the plan run state and see where we are with that so far. And you will see that while I was talking, it's progressed and gotten to a stage where it says that it needs clarifications. We look at all the outputs it's created so far, but it is now stuck at step index 3. So step index starts at 0. It is stuck at the 4th step, and I expect that because the 4th step is where you request human approval, right? If I look at the outputs it's accumulated so far, it loaded the refund policy. You can see that information here. In the refund policy you have criteria like the eligibility for refund, sort of the time period for the refund, and so on and so forth. The other things that were created as step outputs from the steps, the refund review. This is where the LLM determined that it will approve this particular. It thinks we should approve this particular request, and it's providing its guidance, and it's literally just comparing to the refund policy to make that determination. We've loaded these aren't ordered because it's a JSON. We probably need to fix that so that they're easier to sort of parse. But this is the one that was loaded in the second step, where we are loading the request from the human for a refund, saying, that I bought a hoverboard 3 days ago and well, it ain't working. And finally, we are now stuck at this step where a clarification is raised for human approval. And this is what is sort of contained within the human approval result. So for now, it's a clarification. You can see that raised in the list of clarifications attached to the plan run. And so at this stage, what happens, as a reminder for those of you who are seeing clarifications for the first time, the execution agents and Portia in general are handing over the plan run control to you as a developer and giving you the structured object, the clarification, with the information you need to render it in any form factor you want to a user in order for them to give you a response, so that this can be this agent can receive the guidance it needs and can proceed. So where is this being surfaced right now? Obviously, we are running this through VS Code, and so the clarification is waiting for my approval in VS Code. And there you go. There you have it. It's just been rendered in the command line interface. This is because right now in the code we didn't dwell on that too much, but we're using the CLI clarification hooks and handlers that we have in our open source SDK. We loaded those as part of the config, I believe. There you go. As part of the client, I should say, in the execution hooks. And this is where we will go into a deeper dive of clarifications in a separate video, but this is where you can create your own execution hooks and clarification handlers for other UX surfaces like email. Now, why don't I go ahead and put this damn thing out of its misery and say, yes, 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 this is approved. And now let's go back to our plan run and see what happens. There you go. The clarification has been updated to resolved equal true. The response has been updated to approved. And the plan run has gone back to in progress. So at this stage, Portia has resumed control of the plan run, if you will, and is cycling through the steps. There you go, cycling through the steps. And the steps, as a reminder here, are you have the human approval, and at this stage, it is a case of making the calls to the API endpoints in Stripe via the MCP tools to get the customer ID, to get the payment intent, and to then create the refund. Incidentally, you could also go through the tool calls here to see the list of events that are going on, like the listing of customers and the listing of payment intents and all of the other tools. You can also see the human approval tool here, and that the first time it ran is when it encountered a clarification. The second time it ran, once the clarification was provided, it was able to complete gracefully. And now the refund was also created. So if I go back to the plan run, I suspect it is now complete. Yams. So if you wanted to see what that looks like in your Stripe dashboard, you could go to this particular customer here, and oh look, you can see me again. And there you go. If I look at this customer, and if I look at, there you go, at their payments, you can now see that a refund was created for this particular transaction because the refund just went through. So there you have it, folks. So in this, to recap, in this video, we have seen, in addition to this useless notification that always likes to show up, we have seen how to handle conditionals. We've seen how to hook up any MCP server and load tools from it. In this particular case, it was a Stripe MCP server. And we have seen how clarifications are used when you want to make sure that you get human explicit approval before a step takes place. So hopefully this was useful. Please do like and subscribe. Please leave comments and let us know your thoughts. Tell us how we can do better, what we can improve. Join the conversation on Discord, and please give us a star on GitHub. In the wise words of Tesco, every little helps. Thank you for your time, and see you in the next one.